Welcome to Built Together, the podcast where design, technology, and leadership meet to shape the spaces where we work, learn, and connect in. In every episode, you'll hear from architects, engineers, technologists, and innovators who are breaking down the silos and rethinking how we create spaces that truly bring people together. Because great spaces aren't just about the plans or the tech, they're about the people. And it's what's possible when we build together. Thank you, and welcome to Build Together. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Built Together podcast. I am your host, Xavier Killikelly, and we are joined here today by none other than the wonderful Kay Sargent. I will give Kay Sargent an introduction. Kay Sargent is the senior principal at HOK. She heads the workplace design practice and has over 35 years of experience and has recently kind of really pioneered and been a thought leader in the space of neuroinclusion and neuroinclusive design. Kay, thank you so much for joining us. We are really thrilled to have you here today.
I am thrilled to be here, and I'm even more thrilled that you made me a little bit younger than I actually am. I have over 40 years of experience, but I'll take 35. Sounds much better, and it makes me a little bit younger, so I'm going to go with that.
Okay, well, we'll run with that. I think that we have a very interesting topic to speak about today, and it's one that I don't think comes up enough, especially in the technology design world, the AV design world. But we're seeing it more and more in the architectural design space. I came across your work at Infocom, where I was able to sit in on your speech, and it was just amazing. And I actually got a copy of your book. I didn't mention this, but Kay Sargent is an author as well. So you can read about this research in her book. But I really want to kind of ask you, how did you first become interested in designing spaces for people who were neurodivergent, right? Who are neurominority individuals
Yeah.
in the space?
So there's the truth, and then there's the answer I wish I could tell you. So the truth is that about 9 or 10 years ago, we were meeting with a client who asked, how do you design space for someone that's ADHD? And we didn't have a great answer. And we started to dig into it, and we found that there wasn't a great answer to that. So we started to do the research. The answer I would love to be able to say is it was because of my own personal experiences and that of my children and my colleagues and all these other people that I know. But I didn't really connect the dot right away that the way that we're designing space really does have an impact on those individuals. And it should matter in the AV world. It should be a much bigger topic because I'm going to say two things. A, I'm willing to bet there's a lot of people in the AV IT world that are probably neurodivergent because,
Of course, yeah.
a lot of recovering musicians and people that are active and engaged and think about, how do I make all these things work? And also, I think that way the technology is impacting people today can have a huge benefit, but can also have a huge detriment to how people are functioning in spaces. So I think it's an important topic for this audience.
Yeah, I myself, I'm undiagnosed ADHD, I like to say. I have a difficult time focusing on one thing. I'm always really just kind of interested in a million different things. And I think that one thing that I've experienced is that there are places or spaces rather, where I go and I feel so much more at peace in my mind, not just when I'm working, but also just being in the space itself. And I don't think that many of us in the AV world are diagnosed ourselves, right? As far as that's concerned. But I don't know that we get the question as much as folks in the architecture field. And I think that that's truly, it's a space where we really need to make that leap, or take that leap rather, to start designing in that way.
Listen, there's a lot of people that are over 30 that are not diagnosed because in my generation, it went grossly underdiagnosed. You were just that kid that was hyper, you couldn't sit still, or you were the fidgeter, person that was in the mechanics, whatever that was, and it wasn't diagnosed. And I think now we have a generation that is far more aware of it, but they also, I think, have more tools. And technology can be a double-edged sword. It can be a great enabler.
Right, right. And with that too, I think it's important to kind of ask the question. We hear the term neurodiversity. We hear neuroinclusive design, but can you, I guess, explain what neurodiversity truly means in the space? I think that it's important for our listeners who may have their own definition or who may not know. I think it's important to kind of clarify a little bit of that fact as well.
Yes. So I will say that we are all neurodiverse. We all think differently and process things differently and feel and respond to things differently. But we are not all neurodivergent. People that
Mm,
are neurodivergent tend to kind of fall outside of what is perceived as kind of the norm of how you respond or process or think. It can be
sure.
people that are ADHD, people that are dyslexic, people that those different neurotypes. And it is not a deficit, it is a difference. It is a natural occurring way that we are thinking or processing.
I think that you hit the nail right on the head, and there was a quote in the book, and I may misquote it, but it's not the issue is not that we are all different. It is that we fail to recognize, celebrate, and action on those differences.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and people that are neurodivergent are kind of like the canary in the coal mine. They might feel things more intensely. They might feel things before you do, or might be more sensitive to things, but it doesn't mean that it's not impacting every single one of us.
I think I read another book that struck me almost in the same way as your book, but it was From Green to Gold, right? And it talks about how the green movement in architecture and design was a big benefit to organizations, not just from different building practices, in conservation and all of those different things, but it was just a consideration, right? And so I guess my next question kind of leads to that same point. How is neurodiversity kind of good for business? Because every time you look at designing spaces for that are considering the human-centered design spaces, a lot of times the biggest hangup is, well, can we make a business case for something like this? And it's true for technology as well, right? It's true for technology as well. So how is that good for business from an architectural design standpoint? And then maybe if you can hint at how it's good for business for technology designers to start thinking in that way too, that'd be great.
Okay, so here's the case. We spend 90% of our time indoors, and people are 90% of a company's money, right? You spend 90% of your revenue is going on to your people, your operation cost, right? Only about 10%, maybe 80 to 90, about 10% goes to IT, about 10% maybe to real estate. But if we do anything to negatively impact human capital and people's ability to function, we are negatively impacting their productivity, their well-being, their engagement, their overall health. And so when we can design spaces that help people function at a higher level and help people manage those sensory distractions that are causing cognitive distractions, we can reduce the amount of burnout, anxiety, stress, and improve well-being and our overall health and productivity. So there is a strong business case to be made. And a lot of people that are neurodivergent bring a skill set that is needed. It might be outside of the box thinking. It might be physically to be able to connect things and manage and figure out how to work or fix things. It can be being a troubleshooter. It can be a strong sense of justice, or even being able to find patterns in really complicated data sets that make them highly beneficial to a lot of companies. And so Ernst& Young, SAP, Microsoft, they have all had programs for individuals that are neurodivergent because they have found that those individuals and those teams that they work in perform better.
I feel like those are all amazing things to just keep in mind. And I think it's so true. Like so many organizations may not even have a real strong understanding or an idea of what what types of people make up their company. And when you don't have that information or that knowledge, rather, you go about building spaces that people may not even want to be in, right? That they may not actually find comforting or comfortable, or they may not be able to produce their best work in those spaces. I mean, I've been in some spaces, especially when it comes to technology, where a company may have seen a competitor, or they may have walked into the office of a client of their own, and they're like, "Oh wow, this office is amazing." And so they just outfit it with a bunch of technology, a bunch of screens, and they do all of these different things. but they haven't taken the time to really ask their people if it's what they truly want. And so what you find is you have companies that spend a ton of money on design and technology, and they think, wow, we just made this fantastic space. Everyone's going to love it. Everyone's going to come into this room and interact. And then they find that they have rooms that no one is touching, no one is using, and technology that truly just doesn't really work for that environment.
Yeah, you just laid out the two issues. I think two of the biggest issues. One is the double empathy problem. Everybody assumes that everybody is just like them, and they're not, right? And it's very difficult for us to understand or appreciate somebody that might be triggered by something different or want something different or communicate differently or need to express themselves differently. Some people need to see it, some people need to hear it, some people need both. Right. And technology can help by recording meetings. It can help by closed captioning. It can help by breaking things down into smaller tasks. But I think the other challenge is we've gotten to this point that a lot of people are trying to standardize everything just so they can roll it out quickly and kind of design for the average person doing the average thing. But I don't know who
Right.
the person is anymore. And by designing to the average, we are serving no one. And we need to understand the unique individuals that we are designing for, the business type, the work styles, the neuroset types, all of those things to really create spaces where people can be more successful.
100%. And this podcast is all about collaboration and how can we collaborate effectively. I think that that's one of the things that makes us unique as human beings, right? Our ability to think about ways to make each other better and then come together and do those things. And in the sense of in the spirit of that collaboration, how important is it for uh, designers, whether it's architectural designers or the end user companies designer group, and technology professionals to collaborate early and often on these projects, to really kind of meet the mark of these different needs in these different types of spaces.
You're setting me up to say the controversial thing that I feel, but I will say it. I don't think we get AVIT guys involved early enough in the project. If as a designer, I am designing a space and I don't take into considerations all the things you guys think about and we should be thinking about, then we aren't going to get off on the right foot. And I don't believe we should have a test fit approved until AVIT has looked at it. Because if I don't position a room correctly, if it's too much on the window and, it doesn't function with the AV system, if it's too narrow, if I don't have the right height, if I don't have the ability to kind of view the whole room, if I'm not orienting it correctly, all of those things can make it almost impossible for you all to come in at the end and make that function in the way they might need it to function. And so we have to have a much better understanding from the beginning that technology is a vital part of the solution. We need to make sure that we're thinking about those things from day one.
Amazing. Honestly, you say it's controversial. It's something that I truly believed in my time as a design consultant earlier on in my career, that as early as we can start to have those conversations, it truly makes a difference for everyone involved. And we all kind of have our piece to the puzzle, so to speak. But when you're really truly doing the human centered design approach, it takes a village, right? To say a cliche term. I hate to be that guy that does that, but it's true. It takes a village, and technology is advancing in a way where we have to start to think that way, right? And I think it's true for many folks. You've worked with organizations like KPMG, ARUP, and airports as well. Really, really high profile projects. And what made those projects important, and what were some of the primary kind of concerns that those clients had as it related to, neuroinclusive design?
So I would say that good projects start with good clients and clients that value design and value different thinking and understand that if you want people to be successful in your organization, that the space literally is a cultural platform and that we need to create spaces where people can thrive. And that doesn't happen by accident. It happens there's an element of great design, but there's also a science to what we do. And it's about bringing those things together, I think, that really create a successful project. And all of those clients some of our most successful clients and several of the ones that we write about in the book, they started from day one realizing our people are our biggest asset, or our customers or the people that are coming through the space. And we want to design to maximize their potential and to recognize the uniqueness of who we are serving today. It's not about creating something generic. It's not about getting it done as quickly or as cheaply as you can. Doesn't mean that it's going to take more time or more money, but the driver really is about designing for the people, being human centric.
Yeah, yeah. I think that the human experience is changing every day. I think that my human experience is different than my daughter's generation of their human experience. And I'm sure the generation to follow is also going to have a pretty unique experience. Like for me, I find myself thinking like, look, I work in technology, so I'm pretty savvy with technology because I'm in the field. There's others that I speak to that are in my same age group that may not be so technically inclined. I'm finding that with this younger generation, especially my daughter's generation, they're all like they know technology. It's like it's as if they were came out of the womb with an iPad. So their lived experience is going to be different. And I think that that also kind of brings me to the question in doing the research for your book. I've seen some of your speeches, and you've talked about if you knew what you had to do going into it, things would probably be different. But in going through the research for your book, what would you say was the most like surprising fact that you found in design and just kind of in this discovery, so to speak?
Yeah, I think as a designer, I've always believed that the spaces that we design can have a positive impact on people. I think an aha moment was really understanding that if we aren't designing these spaces well, they can have a negative impact. And that for us is a non-starter. And so really understanding to the extent that space and technology and all the things that we are encountering today and having a deeper understanding of that, it was not just about people that are neurodiverse. This is really about sensory processing and cognitive well-being to optimize performance so that everybody can thrive. In a world where we are being assaulted with sensory stimulation and overload and technology overload, that it's becoming overwhelming. And we as people need to kind of create spaces where we can be successful and thrive. And I think a lot of that has to do with, natural, parts of nature. Where I think we've become very disconnected to nature. I think we're putting people in very unnatural environments. And we need to really think about who we're designing for and what is the impact that we're having.
And so as AV technology professionals or anyone who's designing these immersive spaces, right? We say them all the time. What are some things that organizations should consider to be able to work with a firm like HOK or to work with a firm that's truly focused on human centered design and understanding that the processes may be different, discovery may be different, client interaction and interviewing may be different. But how can AV companies or professionals who are interested in designing in this space, whether it's technology or otherwise, what should they be considering? What research should they be doing to really kind of make sure that heads are in the right space or that they're thinking of the right things?
Yeah, well, I would say our industry needs to do a lot more research on this in the beginning. So there isn't a lot out there, and that's part of the reason why we have done as much as we have, and we put out the book to kind of share with as many people as possible. I think we need to really understand how everything is impacting us, and if we know some of the biggest triggers in the built environment are sound, lighting, and temperature, but are we doing anything different to really address that? And we have the ability today to do so much more, and we're not. So, we have the ability, if I could create a sensory profile for you and to understand what your triggers are and what your preferences are, then we can tie into all the sensors in the built environment that we have that are collecting information. We can put that into an app and we can connect that even with your schedule so that when you arrive at the office, it could say, "Good morning, Xavier. Welcome to the office. We know that you need to do some focused work this morning, and we know you like it a little bit cooler, in a little bit buzzy space, but you want to be away from X and Y loud talkers. We recommend that you sit here." But then as
Right.
the sun moves and the people come in and the conditions change and your schedule shifts, it might nudge you to go sit someplace else in the building that is more suited to your preferences so that we can really maximize that condition that you're in. And then it can also track, that, well, you say you like quiet, but you avoid the quiet spaces and you sit in those areas that have a little bit of buzz. So maybe we're going to recommend something a little bit different with you, right? I mean,
Right.
you can't go online shopping without it understanding your perceived preferences and guiding things towards you. So if we can take all the knowledge that we have and tie it in with a space, leveraging technology, we can create environments and experiences fueled by all those things that will help maximize.
And are there any kind of like websites or places where organizations could go to find these types of surveys that they can do within their organization to start to figure some of this stuff out, right? Because I think that, as you mentioned, there's not a lot of research. And anytime there's not a lot of research, what you end up having is you have to have someone who is like truly just focused on figuring this out to really kind of find those places. And maybe it's just like a helping hand. Is there any resources that you all may have at like HOK, or are there spaces where people can start to go into this type of discovery?
Wrote the book specifically to share all the information that we had, and you can also go on HOK.com to see a lot of the stuff and some of the results from the things that didn't even make it into the book. But there's also a place called sensoryintelligence.com that you can go and see what your sensory triggers might be, and it can help tell you, because it sounds so obvious, but for many of us, we've been masking so long, we really don't truly understand what our true triggers are. So it can help you understand what your potential triggers are. And then there are lots of apps that like will tell you surveys about place, but most of them don't really get into your sensory preferences. They might just say the sensory condition, right? So it's too loud, it's too quiet, it's whatever. But you might want a space that's a little bit louder and buzzier. And I might want a space that's quieter, right? And so I think what we need to understand is that all these things that average everything at the end of the day don't really meet most of the people who aren't average, right? Most
Right.
of us are not average.
I mean, I used to say all the time that I wasn't average, but I was just trying to, sound cool. So it's interesting to say. And having read the book, I really it really opened my eyes to how obvious certain things are to me, but how, if you're not thinking about it, how it just doesn't seem to click. Like the different, having different neurodiverse tendencies in textile environments, or how lighting affects me at times. And being into technology now, of course, I think about it all the time. But before, even in things like school, right? Like when I was learning, I was never really the type that I felt like I suffered from a bit of dyslexia, but I was never the type that liked to get up and write in front of the class. Get up and do a math problem in front of everyone, because that just wasn't my strong suit. But I think in higher education, or in education in general, eh, I don't think there's enough focus on that piece too. But that's another topic for for another day
Yeah.
type of deal.
Yeah, and look, there's a lot of advice out there that's actually bad advice, right? So, the
Hmm.
golden rule, do unto others as you would want them to unto you. That's assuming that everybody wants what you want, and most people don't. I think
Right.
there's this whole thing about slides, and don't put words on slides, just make them all images and graphics. Well, a lot of people need to read something to process it. In fact, more people are visual learners than auditory learners. Seeing it can actually be really impactful. And I think, they always say like, "Oh," like, make a list of all the things and then tackle the most important things first. A lot of women specifically need to get rid of the clutter. They need to get rid of the stuff that just isn't, so then they can focus on the big thing, right? And that's almost the exact opposite. So there's a lot of advice that's out there that we're all taught that isn't in sync with the way some of us might actually function and process. And like, you struggle with that. And I think we just need to understand, yeah, I actually am not that person that needs that. I actually need the exact opposite, and to embrace that and to do what works for you.
Man, I thank you so much for that piece, because that's one of the biggest hangups that I have is when you are searching for information, especially on the internet. There is a ton of stuff out there that really tries to put everything and everyone in a box. And this is gonna sound a bit controversial for me to say as an AV technology professional, right? Like even in our world, a lot of companies are really just trying to have that cookie cutter out of the box. Hey, this is what you need. And I feel like we are entering a time, and you can correct me if you think that I'm wrong, where not just technology, but design and so many other things will have to become a lot more bespoke. And in the age of technology and robots and all these different things, it's going to be an incredible time to be a human. And I think that if we can focus on building spaces where humans can thrive, I think that it would be a great thing. And it starts
Yeah.
with these types of conversations.
I mean, to your point, I think we have a whole lot of clients right now that are really focused on standardizing everything. They're standardizing it, and that because they want everybody to be able to, like, it's kind of like proof everything, make it so that it's as simple as possible. And I think there's a whole lot of people right now that they're designing things for the lowest common denominator. And necessarily thinking about the digital fitness of different individuals, you might need something far more, elaborate or intuitive than I might need something that's really dumbed down, right? And so, but if everything is exactly the same, they're probably not meeting either one of our needs.
I would agree. We're kind of close to the wrap up here. I know I want to be respectful and mindful of your time. This has been a phenomenal conversation, Kate. I expected it to be great, but you surprised me with your level of compassion and this whole design effort. And thank you so much for that. And I want to kind of leave it with a question for you, or if you could leave designers, technology professionals, construction professionals, and interested parties, right? If you can leave them with one thought for what the future may look like, whether it's 3 years or 5 years, if you can leave them with one thought, what would that thought be?
Yeah, I actually think we predict technology pretty well. You can go back to the Jetsons, you can go back to Star Trek, even Dick Tracy, right? They predicted technology well. What we fail to understand is the human condition, which is so surprising. If you look at any of those shows, they failed to understand the societal shifts that were happening. And right now, if you look at most sci-fi movies, again, they're probably going to get most of the technology pretty interestingly right. But where they're not going to get it right is the human condition. And I think we need to understand who we are designing for. And people don't want cold, metallic, sterile, over computerized spaces. We are human. And anytime things in our life get out of balance, we seek balance intuitively. And so we're seeing a rise in hospitality, authentic, organic, maker movement, things that we as humans can connect to. And we don't believe that these future spaces are going to be these metallic, cold, sterile boxes with screens everywhere. That we as humans don't relate to that. We want to have technology. We want it to be intuitive. We want it to be smart, but it needs to be infused.
Thank you so much, Kay. Truly, truly appreciate it. This conversation has been wonderful, and I'm sure this is not going to be our last conversation. I know that I'm going to bump into you in these neuro inclusive design spaces because I'm fascinated by this.
Well, good.
It's a topic that I think is so relevant and so real, and I'm so glad that you had the opportunity, or that you blessed us with the opportunity to come in today. I appreciate you, and thank you so much.
Well, and thank you. And I'll take anybody and everybody on that bandwagon. So hop on and let's go.